Now, let's deal with the pink elephant in the room, shall we? We live here in 2011, right? And you read this and you think to yourself, this is absolutely insane, right? I mean, we read Acts chapter 5 and we see a husband and wife dying in church for lying. And if you think about it at all, you think to yourself, I mean, who can believe this stuff, right? It's bonkers. And you want to know why we think that way? It's natural. Because, listen, when I started studying this week, and I've read this a lot of times, I thought, how do you teach this? You know what I mean? What do you say about this? This is what's going on. We are so used to God in His forbearance and mercy. Let me explain this to you. When God spoke with Adam in the garden, He said, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What did He say would be the outcome if He did? Death, right? If you eat of it, you will surely die. Right? When Adam and Eve ate, did they die right away?
No.
No. You know something? An animal did die right away. Because remember they covered themselves with fig leaves? And God killed an animal to give them actual proper clothes? See, Adam, and it says that in the Bible that Adam lived almost 1,000 years. So from the moment that Adam sinned in the garden until the actual, when the piper had to be paid for the sin that he committed, it happened so much later. Right? See, that is what you call God's forbearance or God's long-suffering. That God does not expect or exact the judgment that He's due right away. There's a time lapse. He gets it eventually, but it's not immediate. And what's going on here in Acts chapter 5 is that God is exacting the punishment at the moment. And it's important for us to realize that just because God delays in bringing His righteous judgment does not mean that the punishment shouldn't be due right away. And we're so used to God being long-suffering and God waiting and God taking time that it causes us not to take seriously the reality of the consequences of the decisions that we make. And I think that's what makes Acts chapter 5 so challenging for us, because we see here somebody doing something that they shouldn't do, and the punishment for it comes right away. And it's so jarring for us because we're not used to that. But the reality is that God cares that much, and God hates sin that much, that punishment is still due. God, we can praise Him for His love, we can praise Him for His kindness, and we need to learn to praise Him for His hatred of sin. Because that is who God is. God can't be a loving God if He doesn't hate things that are wrong. It would be totally, totally hypocritical for God to be a loving God and not hate things that are abhorrent. And so for us, I think the lesson is that we need to learn from this and say, Lord, teach me to love fearing You. Lord, teach me to not do things that I know are wrong. I mean, we live in a culture that people ask for forgiveness after they've been caught. Isn't that the truth? I mean, you look at the media of the last year. I mean, Tiger Woods. And I'm not singling him out. He just, when you're the richest sportsman in the world and you're in the news, you're in the news. It's like, this man was a serial adulterer. And listen, I'm not throwing stones at him because, listen, we all have adulterous hearts, let's be honest. But if he never got caught in the newspaper, he'd still be married to his wife, raising small kids and doing the exact same thing. Because now he's very contrite, because now everybody knows. But we live in a culture, I think of Elliot Spitzer, who was the mayor of New York. It's like he had been, cheating on his wife and all these times, and then he gets caught, and then he goes, oh, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. But people only get upset when they get caught. And the reality is that as Christians, we shouldn't be upset when we get caught. We should be upset even before we take a step in the wrong direction. Because God sees. We're already caught. Because God sees everything. Does that make sense? And so we shouldn't just be like, oh, it's so wrong, I got caught. No. Before we get caught, before we even do it, because we know we don't do anything in the secret. Everything's out in the open. We say, Lord, I'm sorry before I even start. I'm not going to go there, Lord, because it's going to come out anyway. See, God is long-suffering, but we shouldn't let God's long-suffering and judgment give us a license to do whatever we want. We live our lives before Him completely. Completely. There's nothing that happens that God doesn't see. Could you imagine in America if God, if the sins of the people of God were judged immediately? There would be no megachurch in America. There couldn't be a stadium full of worshipers anywhere in the world if this was going on. Because there would be such fear that would come upon the people. As we keep reading, fear came upon the people. And fear, because people, right now we live in a day and age where anybody can come. And we love big churches and everyone just can filter in. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, because no one's going to ask you anyway. Just come in, get your worship on, and you leave, and there's no big deal. But the reality is, if you walked into a church and judgment happened for the sins that we've committed, churches would be really tight. People would be taking it seriously all week long, wouldn't they? And I think the key for us is, I'm grateful for God's long-suffering, but I want to live as if it wasn't long-suffering. Because the reality is the things that we do that are an affront to God, even if we don't get judged for them at the moment, it's still an affront to God. It's still, God still sees it and it breaks His heart because see, God's just not like the great cosmic killjoy. Just looking to bum everybody's day out. Let's just make it real boring and, just sit and read our Bibles and just be like, all day long. Anything fun is wrong. See, God's not like that. God, His ways for His people are real joy. We love the illusion of joy. We love the illusion of fun. But the things that we do that are an affront to God aren't really fun, although they may seem to be. And we could have a testimony Sunday, all of us will come through and say, I was doing this, I thought it was so much fun, and I realized that it's just, what am I doing? I'd be the first one on that list. See, the life that is lived for God, to honor God, that's real life. That is true living. And Jesus said, if you want to keep your life, you're going to lose it. If you give up your life for my sake and the gospel, then you're going to find it. That's what He said. So He's saying, listen, you can live a self-styled life, and it's going to seem really, really fun, but that's not real life at all. But if you give up that life, that self-styled life that seems so fun but really isn't, if you give that up and you follow me, I'll give you real, abundant life. And I don't know about you guys, but that's what I want. What good is it to live a self-styled life and not have life at all? What good is it, as Jesus said, was it profit man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And what's unfortunate is like we live here in a city where the city is gaining the whole world and losing its own soul.